This is it, quilters. Today is the day we are gonna make the glowing checkered star together. Are you ready? Let's get stitching. Well, welcome back everybody. It is your carefree quilter and host here at Stitchin Heaven, Rob Appell. And yes, that is right. We are gonna work on this glowing checkered star quilt. I'm gonna take you through all three blocks today, teach you how to make it. Now, if you're watching this on April 19th, I apologize. That means we had a technical difficulty and the live feed has gone down because we were doing this as a live all day sew along, but chances are everything's gone smooth. You're watching this later as just a quick review follow-up on the 3 blocks to make the glowing checkered star. Now, I designed this awesome quilt using my cool fabrics, New and Newer Worlds from Tex. There's a free pattern download, links in the description. Let's dive right in. Okay, now we have a yardage chart on the back of our supply list in case you're not working from one of our kits or you're not working from a green colorway. Feel free to go ahead and pick your own stash and go through it that way. When you get on to the last page in the actual pattern, page number 5, I've got a yardage breakdown by fabric and the pieces you'll need for making the project. So you can go ahead and pre-cut everything you need this way if you didn't get one of the pre-cut kits. And then we're gonna just kind of dive, like I said, right in to the beginning steps. Our very first block in the project is the actual easy checker, the checkered square, we'll call it. And the first set of instructions, we're actually going to make a series of strip sets, and these strip sets will be used throughout this block and other blocks as we go. So if you look on your instructions, you're going to make 5 strip sets that are just your black and white or a 2 fabric combo. And then you also notice that you're going to make 2 of the 3 strip combo and 3 of the opposite 3 strip combo. Folks, later on, those will be used for the checkerboards, okay? So I just want to make sure there's a little bit of differences. You have 2 strips and 3 strip combos. Follow the instructions, make accordingly. And as we dive in to this first block, I have simply taken my 2 strip combo, the black and the white, and then I've subcut these down into 2.5-inch subcut strips. Now, looking carefully as I begin to assemble the block, you know we're going to need to have a strip on each of the short sides, but to make the long strips, I've also simply just joined 2 of them together and created a seam so that it will look just like this as we go. Doing my best to press over to the dark side fabrics just to help a little bit of that glow not show through. So if we're building this block, the first thing we really need to do is stitch on our 2 short sides. And folks, just make sure you have your dark squares or your black squares on opposite corners, because remember, we're going to be building ourselves a checkerboard down the road all the way around the square. So we're going to take a second. Now this square in the center should be a 4.5-inch square, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch that on with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Now the cool thing about this block is I'm just going to sew on the opposite side, but I spun my fabric, so I need to spin my new add-on piece also, making sure those whites are in opposite corners. And I might as well make sure my iron is getting nice and warm, because that'll be needed next step. We're going to iron those after we sew on both sides. And now that those short sides are both on, I'm going to head on over to my wool mat. And I like to press into this square because the square doesn't have any seams in it yet. So this just makes things a little bit easier on the fabric themselves. And then as I go to approach my longer squares or my long 4 pieces, just make sure it's a checkerboard, line up those corners, and rock and roll into the sewing machine. We're making quilts today, folks. I know this is going to be no surprise, so everything will be a 1/4-inch seam allowance, so I don't have to keep saying that all day. And then also, I like to just take a moment and double check down here at this last point, making sure those little fabrics are going to line up down there as well. just for a nice tidy block, tidy finish. Like before, I'm going to put on both long sides before I hit the wool pressing mat, and just watching, making sure we're making our checkerboard. It is called the glowing checkered star for a reason, folks. Don't forget to line up that last bottom corner. Now let's head back on over to that wool mat, give it a good press. And you'll be making 12 of these units to make what we need throughout the whole quilt. So I'm just going to set these aside for later, and let's get into that next part. Okay, so moving on to what will be titled page 2, we're now going to start to make the checkerboards that become checkerboard on point that you see here in the quilt. And this is where the whole project started for me, folks. I was asked one day via email, that's right, shoot me an email, rob@stitchinheaven.com. If you have questions or would like to learn other things, you can also drop your requests in the comments below. Make sure I know what you would like to learn. And one day somebody said, Rob, how do we get a checkerboard on point without losing all the tips? And real quick funny story, folks, I started with a 16 patch my first time. It took me so much to cut down, but we've learned an easier way. So you're going to go back to those 3-part strips you had. This is what the individual block is going to look like as we build out. And now what I've really done super easy is I took the 3-part strips, but remember we have different color families or different quantities, right? The darks, I have 2 of them, and the lights, I have 1 of them, so we can yet build another checkerboard. On these, again, always pressing into the black fabric so that I can nest my seams as I go. I'm going to do that now to build the beginning of our center checkerboard, but we still have to make it work on point. Now for this, I will take a moment and press, and I'm just going to press away from the center. Bring back in, and once again, just double check. We don't want to have to do any seam removal today, that you're getting your checkerboard effect that you started looking for. Now, making this come to point is actually going to be very easy. We're going to just finish pressing out the original checkerboard square block. And then your instructions called for 2.5-inch squares that have been cut on the diagonal. And you're going to need 4 of these for every 1 square. And what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to stitch these in place onto the white squares. And please note the overlap. One of the easiest ways to make this work is when I go ahead and I lay on my first piece, right sides together, I'm going to look at this point. I want to make sure the point is somewhat centered in the field of that white square. I'll put this other one on incorrectly, and you would be able to see the difference. So again, one side at a time, using the center of the block to help stay somewhat accurate, but we will be trimming these all back down in just a moment. I'm starting just slightly off. I'm going to sew through just a little ways, and I'm going to cut my threads, but I'm not going to take the time to do any back stitching. Bounce to the other side. Set that down, center it now, and you notice I didn't press over that first triangle, so it's going to really help me keep everything even more centered and accurate. Stitch this one onto the edge as well. Yeah, and then once I have all 4 pieces on, this is when we're going to hit the wool mat, and we're just going to press these all over, and I'm pressing away from the center block unit. And now what we're going to do, folks, as you can even see in the instructions right here, we're going to trim this down to force it to point, and I'm hoping I have a nice little 6-inch square, which I do, which is going to make life really easy. So you notice I laid that on the 4 points that I just stitched on, so you can see where some of that thread's going to kind of be for the overlap. I'm going to center it, but look at this trick, folks. What I'm really doing right now is I'm watching this diagonal line run through the center crosses of the white fabrics, and it's the same thing happening on the other side. So that should give me my most accurate 90-degree crisp now checkerboard on point. And I'm also noticing I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance past those white squares, so hopefully our points won't go missing. Hopefully. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly trim around. This is when I'm wishing I had brought over my little Martelli mat, something that would allow me to rotate that a little easier. Make sure I have all my trims cut. Okay, so that was literally that simple and nowhere nearly as complicated as when I originally designed it. These parts for your scrap bag for another day. Got a good video for you on scrap bag making as well. Now, block's not finished, folks. We need to add on our corners. Super simple there, no surprise. We had our squares that were cut from our supply list earlier, okay? Those are cut on the diagonal. I did go ahead and jump a little ahead so that I wouldn't be spending all of that time on camera for you today. So I'm just going to set those ones there. And now, just like before, I'm going to sew on opposite sides. Once again, utilizing the look of the center. You see how I can see it looks like about maybe 3/4 or 1/2 inch of black on both sides. I want to scoot this down. So just utilizing the, I messed it up. So just utilizing the rest of the block to help my accuracy visually. And I'm going to put on these 4 sides like I put on those little black corners, but now I'm sewing from off of the edge, 1/4 inch, all the way through down to the other edge. So for these, I'm going to put on 2 sides, but then I will go over to the wool mat and press them open so that I can actually get the proper overlap at these corners up here with the next pieces. So we'll just do that really quick over here. And I am going to again press away from center, making it just easy on the fabric as possible. I also, folks, really like to try to omit as much bulk as possible. So at this moment, I've also gotten in the habit of coming here and trimming out these corners of the green triangles that we just stitched on. That just makes it all feel and actually stitch through better. We don't have that fold of the bulk getting caught up in there. So take the time to do that. Maybe you want to do it assembly line style first. We'll get that done, and now we'll sew on these last 2 sides. Now that the 3rd and 4th sides are on, we're going to hit these at the wool mat, press them open. Pat yourself on the back because most of your points are perfect. And I had 8, I have 7 now. We're good. Good enough for me if you're a carefree quilter. And again, folks, you may also want to just come through here and quickly just take off the rest of that bulk in the corners. You can notice at this point, I'm not being as safe or as accurate, but it's still doing the job. And again, we're just going to set those aside. Let's check our notes. That's correct. I do want you to make 20 of these, folks. So we didn't have as many of the first block. We have 20 of these. And now the rest of it, as you can see here, let's clear off the deck a little, tidy up. We are going to be making, yes, you knew it, half square triangles. But they're big, they're bold, and they're easy, but there's a little bit of a fabric swapperoo going on. What we want at the end of the block is a majority of them. We'll save some later, but I'll teach you that at the end of the video. We want them to look like this. So we basically have our fabric A, the Beasley print, going all the way around the outside. That's kind of your dark, and then your light and your medium on the inside to form those hourglass blocks. So the easiest way really to get your math correct, take those like that, and then I'm just going to pair up one light with a dark, one medium with a dark as I go through my working stack. And then we're going to go ahead, draw diagonal lines on the back of each pair, and then do a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side of the diagonal lines. And folks, I'm going to encourage you to do all of these at once so that you may chain piece them. By grabbing a second piece, do all of the one sides first. Okay. Cut your thread or however you like, come around. I like to separate the blocks, and the little thread cutter on the machine's awesome for that. Take the time to reorganize your stacks so that when you come back to the machine again, I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I re-rotated one, re-rotate them all. Don't get yourself going so fast you make a mistake there. But just watching that guideline run along the side of the foot. From this point, we're going to use our rotary cutter to separate the 2 half square triangles from each other. And you can trim, cut, whatever you like to do, whatever way you like to do it. I prefer like a slotted trimmer or a block lock tool, but right now I'm just going to teach you the old-fashioned way in case you've never seen a half square triangle made before. So first, press to the darker of the 2 fabrics you've made. So in this case, it'll always be that A fabric. Press them all out, take the time, do it like our good old Uncle Henry Ford would do it, assembly line style. It just keeps you from making mistakes. It makes it just feel easier and smoother to me. I like working that way for sure. Okay, so now at this point, we're going to go ahead and trim these down. These need to be trimmed down. I know I had my information here a second ago. Yep. And they do trim down to the 4.5 as well. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the diagonal first, and I'm going to make sure that diagonal runs along the seam allowance, just like that. And I've also got at least my 4.5 inches on either side so that I'm just doing the first side as a trim. A real easy little shave, if you will. And then what we like to do is we rotate the block all the way around, and then you can slide it down, rotate your ruler, whatever works, but then you find your exact 4.5 down at the corner. Make sure your diagonal line still goes right along the seam, and then go ahead and trim these all down, just like that. Okay, so we're going to make those trims, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so now that we have all of our half square triangles trimmed down to the 4.5 inches, they're all going to be stitched together the same. So here's our example now, remembering we want that darker fabric on the outside. So even though you see this as the hourglass block, make all your half square triangles by taking your light side over here on the left and that medium side over here on the right, making sure your darks are up here. Then just lay them on top of each other and sew them from their tips down. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sometimes you may find, like I just did, the bulk will challenge your machine at the beginning. So as long as you know what your seam allowance is, watch this trick, okay? So I had folded them over and I told you to start here because that was just the beginning. But this corner here is still part of the seam. So if you're struggling with your seam allowance, or maybe the fabrics are getting pulled into the corner, of course you want to replace your needle. But see how much easier that is when you don't start on the bulk of a bias seam, or a seam that has stretch. So either way, sew those half square triangles together, make sure they're nice and successful, and then go ahead at this point and press them one more time at the wool mat. I'm going to press them all over to what we're calling the medium fabric right now, or away from that bright limey green that I love so much. And you want to press them all in the same direction as well. You probably know this trick, but that's going to help us put this center seam together in what we call a nested format, okay? So with that, we're just going to come around, and you should have your lights on opposite sides. They'll flip over, and they're going to stitch together, and that seam allowance is going to kind of be on opposite sides now, so it makes that bulk real nice and easy to manage. Make sure you keep a good pinch or a pin or a clip at that union. Run it on through. Double check your bottom corner for a very successful little hourglass block here. However, I don't want you to get carried away, folks. I've asked you to make a bunch of these half square triangles. However, I only want you to make 31 of the squares, because look closely now. Let's go to the quilt to look at the final diagram of how this is all going to come together, right? So we've got our half square triangle blocks, but we're also going to have a few of these independent blocks like this, because with these independent blocks like this, I've also asked you to cut some rectangles and some squares of one of your other fabrics. These, as you can see on page 3, are going to actually be stitched together to form some of your outside borders. I didn't want the checker boards running off of the edges. I wanted them floating around in the middle. So as we go through, let's look at the quilt real carefully. There's two different kinds of rows being made. We have a row being made that has your half square triangle blocks. We'll call these the hourglass blocks, or the third one we just made. Then you have the first block you made. So it's going to go with the checkered square, not on point, then back to a half square triangle block. And also notice the light colors here in this row are always on the same side. Hoping that's making sense. The next row down, we're going to have a start or opposite. Remember, we're kind of playing with checkerboards of the second block unit, the checker on point. Now when we come into the half square triangle units in these rows, notice the dark is over in this upper left corner. So that's kind of playing and allowing these colors to come together, throwing more of a rotation of the colors around with these brighter, lighter pieces. I'm hoping that's showing really great. So you're actually now making two different rows. All of that is explained very carefully in the instructions, but the real trick is watching the colors of those light half square triangles as they travel throughout the rows. At the end of the rows, some rows will have the solid pieces. Some rows will have half of one of the blocks put together. And then at the very ends, we'll have our fun little 4 cornerstones in the very bottom and top corners. So that's what helps bring everything together in this project that I call the glowing checkered star. So to my quilting fan out there that asked me to make a checkerboard on point block, thank you so much for encouraging me to learn something new, pushing me outside of my comfort zone. I certainly hope you've seen this video, and I hope you love the quilt that I made for you. For everybody else, I know you love the quilt I made for you. Thanks again for sewing along with me. I so appreciate it. Make sure you leave your feedback in the comments below, and we'll see you next time. Please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.